squirrel, or a social squirrel. One of the things that really frustrates me about social as we get into that topic is that social seems to be an excuse for people to just continually get interrupted and not do any kind of a deep thinking. By the way, the squirrel references to the movie Up, and I'll probably have a couple of squirrels as we go through this, but Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi did some research on flow, which is a highly productive state. And he said that it takes about 15 minutes to get into this highly productive state called flow. The problem with that is when you're always being social, you're always being interrupted by little things, you can't ever get into flow. So while I love social in a lot of contexts, it's also a potentially very dangerous thing as we start to talk about productivity. My friend Eric Schups says the meaning of social is with beer in hand. And while I love that definition for in general, mostly here I'm talking about all the social technologies that people want to talk about and use. Well, if you've got a time machine, and this is a homage to Doctor Who, you could go back in time and you could look at the 90s and Lotus Notes and groupware. And if you start looking at the studies back in the 1990s about Lotus Notes and groupware and whatever technologies were there, you'll find that they said that groupware, Lotus Notes, doesn't cause collaboration. It enables collaboration. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that it is possible to get some of the things you want, collaboration in this case, but it isn't that if you just do this groupware stuff, it's going to automatically cause it. Social is the same thing. Just because there's a new social technology out and you want to try and figure out how to integrate that with your information architecture, it doesn't mean you're going to cause the business results of people being more collaborative. Let's take a look at employee satisfaction, because a lot of times when folks are talking about, hey, I need to implement some kind of social technology, they're doing it in the context of employee satisfaction. The millennials demand social. No, they don't. They don't. Sorry. They don't demand it. They would like it, and they use it. They've used Facebook more than they use email, but they don't demand it. Our tools are so antiquated that we're losing people. Really? I find that most people who are looking at taking a job really want to figure out who they're working with. They don't necessarily like or dislike the tools. They'll still take a job based on the people that are interviewing them, the people they think they're going to work with. We can't attract top talent without it. Well, I'm not sure that I buy that one either, because I've seen lots of top talent at firms that I know are using very antiquated technology. In fact, some that are still using Lotus Notes. One of the big things that you're supposed to get out of social is collaboration. People are supposed to work together better. But does everybody have the same definition of collaboration? I love using the definition to conspire with the enemy when I'm talking to people about collaboration, because it forces people to think about, well, what do we mean about collaboration? What does it mean for us to say we want to work together? And there are a whole bunch of other factors in terms of collaboration, in terms of trust, and in terms of building a system of policies and procedures and management that helps you get to true collaboration. Peter Drucker said that culture eats strategy for lunch. It doesn't matter what strategy you have and whether it includes social or not. If it doesn't fit into your corporate culture, it's not going anywhere. So let's take a look at the wisdom of crowds. And there is a book by that name. And the idea for wisdom of crowd is that people, when they get together into a crowd, will make a better decision collectively than they would make individually. And for that to work, there has to be a diversity of opinion. And that is, they can't have the same opinion. They can't have been cajoled or socially conditioned into the same spot. They have to have independence. They cannot see the opinions of the people around them because that would influence them. Decentralization. They need to be able to specialize and have their own unique knowledge that adds to some flavor of the conversation. And the last bit is aggregation. We need to take all of the individual judgments and sum them up and get to an answer. So any kind of wisdom of crowd is subject to two possible failures. And the first one is groupthink, and that's something that Irving Janis found, which is they all start to think the same way. If you all have the same experiences, you don't have that diversity of opinion. You don't have that decentralization because you all have the same stuff. The other kind of failure is the tragedy of commons. And so I want to tell you that story real quick. So tragedy of commons, there's a story around it, but in general, it is the depletion of a shared resource by individuals acting individually on their own self-interest. And so the story is that there's common ground in a city where animals are allowed to graze on. And so there's too much grass, there's plenty of grass, and so what happens is everybody, all at the same time, decides, you know what, I could get another cow, and then I'll have twice as much milk, and because I've got twice as much milk, that'll be a good thing, and so they'll just eat the grass in the commons, and it's great. The problem is if everybody does it all at the same time, you deplete the grass. There's no grass left, and then all the cows starve, and everybody has a bad day. This is because the bounding for our reality doesn't include others. We don't think about the overall big picture. We just think about our own internal little pictures. When you do social, you're going to have to get clear on what you want to do. The first thing is pick an objective, or maybe a few, and remain focused on them. Don't get drug around by a social squirrel. Second, plan to measure everything you try. You have to know what the impact is to know whether to do more of it or to stop and do less. Finally, if you don't believe that you've got a plausible chance at being successful, don't do it. You want to think about ritualized dissent. You want to intentionally poke holes at your social attempt before you start. You want to know before it's off the drawing board that it's going to work. You want to have that wildly important goal. You want to know exactly what it is that you're going to try and get. With my apologies to PETA for probably the second or third time in this presentation, one thing about social is, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. You're going to have to pick some small social endeavor and make it successful before starting on the next one. Now, we talked about some cultural norms. We talked about mall walking and cleaning your plate. We didn't talk about elevator etiquette, but that's when you walk into an elevator, most people start to be quiet. And we also talked a little bit about cold start, but we're going to hit that again just because it's really important as it pertains to social. So cold start is the breaking that inertia when you try something new. And so we talked about this before in the context of Amazon reviews and how that was challenging to get this started. So the goal here is we got to create a strong reason to try it. We've got to go back to our diffusion of innovations and come up with a compelling reason and make it trialable and so on and so forth. One of the things that you can do to drive social activity is to create a reward system. There's this psychology of value. You may or may not remember green stamps, but they have no real value until you got them all together and you bought something. I'm doing this with Coke Rewards right now. They don't really have value, but you can trade them in for something that has value. And if we go back to earlier, we talked about Frederick Hertzberg and Hertzberg's article one more time, How Do You Motivate People? Achievement, the ability to do achievement is something that's really important to people. So reward systems play into that. Stephen Rice wrote a book called Who Am I? And his research talked about 16 factors and how some people are motivated by factors like status. And it's interesting because sometimes these reward systems, people build their status around them. Another thing you can do to build social, if you're going to do that, is gamification. Gamification's more than points and badges. It's about making it be playful. And playful has small, little rewards. It has things where you feel like you're being successful. Everybody wants to be a master, so that's what gamification is. One of the things about social is there is this concept of emergence, that you cannot predict the outcome. The outcomes of social are largely unpredictable, and we saw that from diffusion of innovations as well. Our goal is to create conditions, but you can't guarantee you're going to get the outcome every time. Your caterpillar may never turn into a butterfly. All right, one last thing about social, and then we'll talk about some measuring. And when you're thinking about social, you have to think a little differently, because it's less about the things that you're doing and it's about the connections. So it's not about the actors or the stage, it's about their relationship. It's how they fit together. Social is designed to, and implemented properly, can enable more and better connections between people, and that's what you're going for if you're trying to do social. And social, tying this back into our information architecture theme, is we are trying to do social to make it easier for people to socially navigate the content that they want, so they can learn the terms, they can find the people, and they can get to the information they want. So if we're measuring results for social, how do we make this work? If we decide social is a part of our strategy, how do we make that work? Well, the first thing that we need to do is probably change their MBOs, their management by objectives, the goals for the year. If the goals are not aligned to them being social and supportive of one another, then they largely won't. And so that's a problem. You need to align people's individual goals with where you want them to go, because if you don't, you're going to be fighting you the whole way. In terms of the kinds of metrics that you pick, you have to consider the idea of leading versus lagging metrics. And this is an example of a dessert, a high-calorie item, and a scale. Now, think about this from the point of view that a scale is a lagging indicator. It tells you what has happened. You can't, by looking at a scale, say, yeah, no, I don't actually want to eat. I've already eaten it. It's already in my weight. There's nothing I can do about it. On the other hand, you could turn into a leading indicator like calories intake, and if you know that your calories intake is less than your calories outgoing, then you're going to lose weight. It's a leading indicator. It says, hey, I'm doing the right things for the desired outcomes. So in this case, you've got to look at social in the context of both leading and lagging indicators. Your lagging indicators should represent some sort of business value. They shouldn't be the number of tweets or the number of posts or anything like that. It should be real business value. So how many deals did you win because of social? Or how much time did you save because of social? This is the kind of thing you're looking for. So you want to reduce your service desk costs, or increase the number of sales wins, or improve your project profitability. Those are really good lagging indicators for your social exercise. Some good leading indicators, they should reasonably predict the results. So if you take in less calories, you will lose weight. That's simple, direct line. The other thing about leading indicators is you should be able to change them. So I can control how many calories that I take in. I cannot control how much I weigh, except by changing the number of calories that I take in versus what I put out. So response times for RFPs are a good leading indicator. If we can reduce those, reduce scheduled service desk call times, reduce project issue closure times, those are all leading indicators that we're doing the right things.